Hello, this is an Epiphone Les Paul custom in gorgeous flame maple top, red yellow sunburst, set neck of course, made in Korea, Grover tuners, everything about it very pretty, and it has come down to be tweaked or made best possible. Now, this is Derek's guitar he's had for about 10 years, and he is, I think, looking to get back into playing, so I don't think he's done a lot of playing in that time. And so the idea is, let's make this as good as it can be. So a couple of things that I've noticed straight away is that it's set up, or it's currently got 8s on it, so we're going to go with 9s, although we'll set it up with the 8s and we'll change the relief afterwards. So we're going to do the setup on this. We're going to clean it all up because it's got a bit of tarnish and whatever, not tarnish, but yeah, tarnish on the pickup, so we'll clean that up. We're going to replace the bridge with a roller bridge, a gold roller bridge, which is on its way but won't be here till Monday, Tuesday, whoever knows. But we can do the setup beforehand. But importantly, for keeping this thing in tune, we're going to fit an adjustable nut at this end. Also, and let me just do the zoom close-up thing. I'm also going to try and figure out how to do this without getting the noise of fingers handling, because I just can't seem to be able to do this without without getting handling noise. So anyway, so yeah, beautiful looking thing. Just slightly grubby with fingerprints, but we'll clean all that off. Frets generally in good condition. This is already set up with a very low action and almost zero relief, so we're going to need to give it a little bit of relief. The nut on this has been done very well, so everything about this guitar so far is pretty good. The tuners, the stringing here is the wrong way around, so we're going to reverse that, make it sort of conventional. We're going to replace the nut with an adjustable Tusq nut for just perfect tuning stability, as well as the right first fret action. And we're also going to keep it very low and light, but we're going to just iron out a couple of tiny zizzes on the bends, but it's really in good shape. I think it's about the second Epiphone that's recently come here in, really pleasingly good shape, with a tiny bit of work, a little bit loose on the jack socket, which needs a tweak, but generally speaking, everything about it is in good all-round condition. So we'll take off this. We'll do the setup, the fretwork first, and nut first, fretwork, tweak the relief just a tiny bit, and then we'll do that part of the setup, and then we'll get on to the cleaning stuff, and then ultimately we'll wait for the new bridge to arrive, swap it out, and we'll be ready kind of to restring with 9s. So this is again just very slight, not hardly any problem at all, but it's worth getting it exactly right. And like I said, good condition nut for a change. Well, I've seen more and more on some of these Epiphones, but generally speaking it's not something you find on all guitars. So looking close up if I can, handling noise at the frets, they are in good shape. Looks like they've possibly been leveled at some point, which wouldn't surprise me, so maybe that's something they're doing in the factory now, which is again a good thing to be able to comment on. I'm no expert on anything about these guitars, whether that's a genuine top or I'm sure it is for an Epiphone. Intonation here is out, so new bridge, more intonation room anyway will be a good thing. And then we'll clean up these pickups so that Derek has a kind of just feels like a fresh start. One of the things I will take off here is the plastic stuff. It just picks up dirt and it's sitting there. It's a kind of, we'll send it back with the guitar, but I'll just pin it to the wall for the time being. It sort of gets in the way of cleaning, basically. All right, close-ups over. Hopefully with minimal handling noise. That's the plan. Okay, so relatively boring camera view. So what we'll do is we'll start with the nut business. Now, just we'll do this thing again that some folks seem happier with, and I'm going to use a little bit of the old Gorilla Tape every time, and I'm just going to put it on this bit here, loosely, relatively loosely, over this little corner bit here where the strings may hit against the finish. So anybody who's concerned about that can now not worry. That was a good piece of feedback from somebody, and it just means that if there's any tension, there isn't, but say there was some tension, then I would be able to make sure that nothing got dented. It's, like I said, it's never been a problem, but if you can see a way of improving somebody's confidence and reassurance, then why not do it? So off comes the truss rod cover. What I should do is I should probably just stop and start, do a 5-minute timed section of something as the sort of drop-in video, because I don't really have upload power to do the big uploads. Okay, it's got a Chinese style or Far East style thing. Funnily enough, that nut looks like it's plastic. Okay, so we're going to do the world famous knocking it off. I'll use my thing that spreads the load a little bit. You hear the crack noise. Now this thing sits quite low, but it's not in a slot or anything, so it should just shall just come off backwards, but it's clearly been fairly well glued, and that takes off. It's been glued, and most interesting. So that sits on. We need the close-up for this. I haven't seen this before. This is actually sitting on binding material. Let's do the close-up. Oh, sorry, handling noise. So close-up material. This is it's a plastic nut, fairly heavily glued into something. So we're going to have to rebuild that. Are we videoing? Yeah, we are. Oh, it's not. Hang on. Since when did I start doing things in portrait mode? Keep fingers away. Does this start it? No, that shuts it down. Bleeding. I tell you what, the thing's driving me mad. It's got a good camera, but I still haven't got used to it. Right, so I have to click down here, start, and then we make some sort of noise that we can sync on both of those. It's a bit like the old clapperboard. Anyhow, so there we have an unusual thing to see a nut slot sitting on binding. Not seen that before. That's weird. And with the glued section, a little chunk of this has come up. We can either try and get that off, and we might try that, and then glue it back in, and then we'll be good to go. Or we'll have to fill it in some way. But there you go. A little bit of challenge. Ain't no big deal. And there's your Chinese Far Eastern style truss rod adjuster. Okie dokie. Gratuitous close-ups. Okay, so how would we get this off in one piece? Well, if it was going to come out, if it was going to play ball and just come off, it would come off like this, but it's not going to, is it? Because it's well stuck. So we might put it in a, oh sorry, are you running? You are. Put it in a vise over here and try and blade it off and keep the shape, but that's highly unlikely too. It's more likely going to crackle and break off in shards. Yeah, that's not, it's plastic, it's stuck to plastic, permanent. Okay, so we're going to need to rebuild this a little bit, which is going to be a bit boring, but the plan will be that this fits in the end there like that. I mean, to be honest, we could put it straight on top like that and that would just do the job. I'm just being finicky. That would work. Sorry, that alone would work. We don't really need to rebuild it, but I'm a perfectionist. So what do I have that will do it easily? It's sticky plastic, soft plastic. It's split away. Well, it's a binding, isn't it? Okay. I mean, I like being precise. So let's use a bit of Plast Aid. That's what it's for. This is a fairly quick drying resin, and it's only going to take me half an hour to get it done. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to build up a little vertical thing that's going to act as a blocker. I've got a piece of mother of pearl here, that's too thick. We need a piece of plastic, or even a bit of sandpaper. I've lost my scissors now. Where the hell's that gone? That's not right. Can't function without scissors. Ah, here we are. Okay, so the idea is I can make a little piece of retaining wool, sort of stiff material. Will it go in there like that? Yeah, nicely. So that will sit all the way down there. Then you want a very small amount of material mixed up. So let's see if we can just clean out this pot. I'll find another one. This is the pot I use for making up Plast Aid. So quite handy to have the same one all the time, although it does need a clean out every now and then. Except that it sticks to the bottom and won't come out until you do that. Pardon me. Okay, gunge, 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 throw away, throw away. Right. So I only need a tiny amount. So I need the tiniest amount. How much have I got in here? That's very little. Can I even see through here? Oh, that's tiny. This isn't going to make another nut's worth, which is a shame. Am I just being? I'm being extreme, really. Do you know what I'm going to do? I'm not going to use this. I'm going to. This is too little of this material left. What I have got is I've got some other resins which I can use. This is a dark resin, but it doesn't matter. It's just going to be used to make it level. So let's put that out of the way. Out of the way. Use that. Put that out of the way. That out of the way. I'm going to need to come at it from around about this side. Okay, so this is in the right place. That's good. I need that up to about here. That stay there. That's good. And I can actually tack that on with a bit of green tape. So that's but that's 24 hours. Maybe I'll go for something a bit quicker. It's a lot quicker, really. I could use milliput, which is the same colour. That probably makes more sense. Except, maybe you've got it all up. So what is left? Have I got any of that white stuff left? No. Come on now. None of that. Okay, let's go with the fast drying stuff. We're just going to mix up a little bit and fill this in. Just for my own peace of mind. But it only needs to be a tiny bit. So let's mix up. Come on. Right, let's just separate this out. This has come out in uneven amounts. I'm just tidying up my materials so I've got a 50-50 mix. So all I'm doing here is I'm just creating a tiny amount, a small amount of this resin, clear resin, and it's a fairly quick drying resin, and I actually don't need hardly any. So and I'm only doing it to level up this little piece here. Let's get in position. I'll go away. In position. Okay, we go all the way up to the paper, and then up to the broken off bit. It's nice and smooth and level. I could guess how much to put on, but we can sand back what we don't need to make it flat. So my main concern is that at this point it's either dead flat or slightly proud in terms of its fill. So I prefer it to be a little bit more than less, if you get what I mean. So I'll just drop in a little bit more, fill it out, bring it level down to the edge, and now it's partly gone on the back wall, so back wall, the rosewood. So what I'll do is I will just make sure I clean that back. There we go, because we don't want that getting in the way. Okay, and then I'll get a blade to make sure. So this is just a small detail. I'm just I've completely failed to take anything there. So thin a layer is actually not, I can't actually access it. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so I'm going to leave that to set, and that's going to give me, it's a little bit up at the end, but that will give me a surface I can just level back. So I've got a nice little slot leveling file which I can use in a minute or in an hour or so. So I'm going to take a break, leave this where it is, and we'll come back. Hello. Okay, ready for fret leveling. Adjustable nut is on there, sitting there, ready to go. I put it on top of the slightly resin, and then I lifted the action up to where I wanted it. So it's kind of sat there and it's flattened the resin off underneath. Now we've got zero relief in here, so I think we need a bit. Not a lot, but some. And I constantly get into discussions about how much. And somebody says, oh, you didn't look at the Epiphone specifications. You call yourself a something or other. Anyway, now in this case we are going to get a bit of relief pulled into the neck when we put heavier strings on, so we'll keep this out ready, but we just want some on for now. So people say, haven't you checked the specs, don't you know how much it should be? And I pretty much say, no, I'm going to start with a little bit rather than none, and for me a little bit is around about 0.2. I'm just going to check if this is an active truss rod that works positively in both directions, which appears to do. So on these 9 gauge strings, even though they're not really pulling hardly any load on the neck, I can actually still bend it into a slight relief, which is there. Okay, so now I've got my leveling equipment. I can just use that one. Okay, this, by the way, here's the plastic nut from the Epiphone. That's a horrible nut, that really is. Plastic. And here's another one from another episode. Another Epiphone sewed the other day. 2 Epiphone nuts. Plastic. Okay, so I'm going to begin the leveling process by calibrating the beam, and I do so by the time-honoured method of using my 3 brass, whatever those things are called, nuts, dome nuts, and I use them to curve the truss rod just enough so that it matches the curve, the very slight curve in the neck, and I know that when they're all touching exactly at the same point, or the bar touches all 3 of those at the same point. Now after that, I basically just use mostly gravity at this point, just to level the frets. And what I can see straight away, if we've got a couple of high ones, this thing was playing pretty well even before I started this, but you can see, I'm going to show it on here, you can see from what the marks that the fret leveling tool gives you, you can really tell what's happening. So if I try and keep my fingers away from the mics, so where we go, it's leveling the edge right there, nothing on the edge there but a little bit inside, touching those, not much there, more there, a lot there. So this is the one that's going to be getting in the way of a lot. That one's a bit too, that one tiny bit, that one's hardly touching. In fact, that's below the level of all the rest, and if we wanted to bring it in we could keep on going, and then a bit more leveling down there. So that is a tiny bit of, didn't I even press, forget the close-up, I didn't press record, I just had it sitting there. Yeah, anyway, I'll talk you through that again, that's just silly. Okay, so the point is, it follows what I just said, but what we should find, or what's important, is that first of all this plays cleanly every individual note, which I'm pretty sure we'll find it will. Right, each note good. Now when a note has a slight choke, chokes out, we'll find that the choking out is caused by slightly high fret, but in the what I call the G track, or even just over the G track into the D track. So it means we won't hear the improvement, or the slight improvement in this case, it's only minor, until we get down level in that track. So now I'm leveling just to either side of the B track now, and kind of letting a little bit of downward pressure, but not much, and the leveling file is doing what it will. I'm going from side to side, so I'm getting both, either side of the B track. Now again, here we want the notes in the B track to all play, which is amazing how clean they are, because that's an incredibly low action. I wouldn't even really want to measure it. Normally I would, but I can tell you already it's below 1 mil, or it's about 1 mil on the last fret, high E last fret, which is incredibly low. Normally I wouldn't necessarily challenge a leveling process like that. So I just recalibrated there and found the truss rod is set to the same curve still, so I didn't need to adjust it. Now this is going to be the place where I clear out any slightly choked out high bends. And of course with an 8 set on here we can get some huge bends and we can really test it out. So I'm going either side of the G track as before, and I can see that's taken a fair bit off this 11 and 13, so I get the feeling that's where it would have been choking out before, but it's actually not at all, not very much at all in real terms. Pretty good. Okay, so we recalibrate now for the D string and then D track, and then we go on from there. Right, with a neck like this, we'll probably, there you go, look, if anything, the tiniest bit of adjustment there. So just a tiny bit more bend in the leveling tool. It's actually in the wrong slot there. Let's just move it to there to make sure. There you go. So the great thing about this is that the 3 brass feet or nuts, they kind of map a median curve across 3 points. Now interestingly, that makes a sort of an ideal curve, if you like, spread, divided or spaced across 3 points. So the curve is represented by 3 points, 3 mathematical points. What, in truth, the neck could be a bit like this, but because of the fact that this method identifies or creates a notional, an ideal curve, what it does is it brings that curve to the slight unevenness of the actual neck, and it manages, for that reason, this method, to just even out fluctuations in the neck or undulations that other methods can't deal with. And one of those undulations is typically the knuckle joint, where the stiff part of the Les Paul neck meets the thinner and more bending part of the Les Paul neck. And again, no other method takes care of that, meaning that lots of other people do a thing called fall away here to overcome that congested area, but this curve gently imposes itself, and I put it to amazing use the other day by taking care of a Chinese Martin copy, counterfeit Martin, which had a stiff part here, but the neck was completely, it sort of plateaued here, and it wasn't like under load. Well, it was under load, but it was worse than any Les Paul, so you had a kind of slight curve here, and then it just became solid there. Now, there was looking like at one point there was absolutely nothing for it other than to take the frets off, strings off, frets off, and literally plane it out to make a new flat surface. But actually this method, where I used the gentle curve, I created an ideal curve with this tool and then gently imposed it onto this knuckled area here, because the problem is caused by the point where the plateau joins the curve. You get this knuckle, and it's amazing that this tool is able to gently scoop that out. And now it doesn't, you can't see it with the eye, but it does it enough to allow the strings to move, and in this case certainly does it really well on an acoustic, because they don't need to be that low in action anyway. But it just really helped free up. Now here I'm just taking care of the E track. I'm going right to the edge to make sure that we've got everything, and this one is showing up as pretty high here. So we've got high spot all the way across to about here on the 13th, but here extremely high on the 13th, and that would have been getting in the way slightly as well. So all those on. Nice. Oop, wrong way. Backwards wound. Beaut. Oh, and we've got the bends. Okay, right, so that's the fret leveling part done. Oh, I just pinched a nerve in my thumb. I have a nerve that gets caught on the edge of guitars, which can make it quite difficult to play chords in certain styles, but anyway. So just a thought now, this is useful for you to know. When you're taking an adjustable nut off this top part, even though the bottom part is now kind of stuck to the resin underneath, which is cool because it flattened it out, when you take off this or put strings on, you want to slacken off the outside and move inwards, and leaving the two middle ones tight until the last minute, and then remove those. Oops, wrong way. Come in from the outside and then go the right way, flatten those off, slack those off, and that will stop the nut pinging off. Now this one probably is fitted quite nicely, but it can sometimes be loose, and when you put the thing in you can easily remove it, and that goes in the same way each time, with the fat edge of the nut pointing towards the thing. If you can't figure it out, then there's a little number impression on there, and you can see that it's mirrored on the base, which is nicely made in Plast Aid. And there you go, put those back together. Actually this is nice, very nicely fitting, so you can move it around and it won't go anywhere. So the leveling part is done. Now we need to focus on, well, the leveling and the nut I should say are done. So the next step here is we'll reprofile these frets. So since they're leveled, the process of leveling has to some degree flatten them slightly, and of course in order to make them play the best they can, we need to reshape them so that it's no longer, oh no, look, somebody's naughty person has locked these in the worst possible way. Yeah, so we're going to need to, yeah, I hate these double locked things. They make all kinds of problems for people like me. Anyway, yeah, so we're going to take these frets and we're going to reshape them so that they're no longer flat spots, and they're more arch shaped, like the shape that the fret is meant to be. To be honest, if you don't do that, it isn't the end of the world, because the amount of difference that it makes, whether they are slightly flat or arch shaped, is minimal. And by that, God, I hate this method. This means someone like me always ends up getting stabbed by these stupid things. Really, it is not a good way to do strings. There's no need to, by the way. I'll show you once we get to the end of this. You'll see that you don't need to do this and it'll stay in tune. This doesn't help them stay in tune at all. It's a myth, I'm afraid. And you can see now, I'm now having to take sharp objects to your guitar to unhook these strings, which you really, I'm sure, would prefer I didn't do. But actually, there's nigh on no way, there's no other way of me getting this hook of loop of string out, and I got stung as well, which does not endear me to you massively. And that one's out. This one's out, and this one is putting up a struggle. Yeah, so this is actually a pointless undertaking, and as you can see, I'm now getting absolutely nowhere with it, so I'm going to have to try and cut it free if I can do it, and it's not doing it. So this, you can see this is just, doesn't help, it just adds potential for damaging the guitar, which you don't want. So, rule of thumb, please don't lock your strings like that, and simply because it doesn't work, it doesn't add anything. Of course it locks them, but or it ties them on, but it doesn't add any, it doesn't improve your tuning stability. As I shall show you, the tuning stability comes from this, getting the nut right, which we've done by replacing it with a custom made Tusq one, and also getting the slack in your strings stretched out, which we will also do when we re-string it. So, as I said, a lot of people, it's a very new piece of news. The tuners play little or no part at all in keeping your guitar in tune, and that it seems counterintuitive, not least because they've named them tuners. So we sort of brought up to believe that, you know, and you see it in guitar forums all the way, when people say I'm having trouble keeping my guitar in tune, and you get all manner of recommendations for expensive tuners, which is great, because expensive tuners make the guitar smoother to tune, right? But actually they don't alter the tuning efficiency, like I say, contrary to popular belief. Now what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to dial up these pickups, because Kevin, am I going to do it right now? No, I'm not going to do it right now. I'm going to do it afterwards, after we've done the frets. We're going to get in and clean those. The other thing to do is, with older guitars, I want to check that the tuners are done up. Often they come loose over the years, particularly when the finish shrinks or the wood shrinks. Okay, so the point here is we're now ready to reshape the frets, and to do that we mark them off again with marker pen and cover up the flattened areas we've already done, and then we're going to take the Stumac fret recrowning file to reshape them. And what that does is it kind of puts a concave file over the top of this flat surface, or this flat topped arch, and the concave file rounds off the sticky outy shoulder bits so that it returns these frets into an arch shape, which is what we want. And that puts the centre of intonation, or the point of intonation, back into the centre of the fret rather than towards the front of the flat edge, which is what you get. Now the amount that it does that by is so small that I would imagine you would struggle to notice any intonation, but that's why I said it's not the end of the world, providing the fret was polished out and smooth to play. That would be kind of a bigger concern, really. But since we're here, and since we can, that's what I do at this stage, and that's what this file was devised to do. And I use it until I reduce the amount of black marker pen on the top, and that tells me I'm rounding the shoulders up towards the centre, and I stop before I remove all of the marker pen, so I leave as thin a strip as possible down the centre of the fret, and that tells me I've reshaped it but kept the top untouched, which means logically that I haven't raised or lowered the overall fret. It's still relatively level, or level relative to the other frets, because we just made it level. Okay, so here we go. Now 11, 12, 13, 14 might take a little bit longer. Now I was talking to a Real Love Guitar ebook buyer and supporter who ran into a little bit of trouble leveling their frets the other day, and sort of stopped eventually after they'd really hit them hard and flattened them off. And it's one of those things that it's difficult to tutor in text, because it's so much based on experiential learning. So it's why I really always suggest starting with a cheap second-hand guitar that you're not particularly attached to, because not that you probably won't get fantastic results, but it's much better to do it when you're not feeling overly precious or feeling like you're risking too much, and that gives you a sort of, frees you up mentally to learn better. So he's going to need to take everything he learned from that levelling. He managed to get the guitar playing in the end, but it cost him a lot of fret metal. One of the things that he needs to learn is the point at which his instinct or his experience is going to tell him to stop levelling because it's not working. And there is a point. So for example, I'll give you a really crude example. Years ago I used to use, where's it gone? I used to use this fret levelling file. I'm currently using it as a bit of a sandpaper block, but this, got it from Crimson Guitar, and it's made of, believe it or not, aluminium. Anyway, I used to level frets by checking with a fret rocker, as people do, and I refretted a guitar, nice new frets, and checked it for levelness. Okay, it needs levelling. Got the levelling beam on, kept going. Checked it for level again, more rocking. God, kept going, and I literally went until I'd nearly taken away half the frets, until I looked at the close inspection of the edge, and I'd used this for so many years that on each side there are 3 patches where by definition the frets always touch between those 3 marks on that side, and a different 3. Look, they're marked up already because I've made this point before. There were, on every side there were 3 areas outside of which the frets never sat, because when you're using that one you can only get it within a range. So and what it had done, because this was aluminium or aluminum, it had worn a little tiny dent in all of these 3 areas, and so it was never going to give me a straight reading. And so I'd lost 50% of the fret life because that was not flat. And all I needed to have done was to put this on a flat block and gone, and then put it on another one and ground it out and made it flat, and then carried on. But so the fix of it wasn't even that, it would have been simple at the time, but it wasn't the lack of a fix that was the problem. It was the fact that I didn't recognise the point at which I should have stopped, and I just said, look, this isn't working, I'm doing something wrong, or something in the system is not right. Now in Mark's case, doing his first fret levelling the other day, it wasn't that situation. He was using the banana method, but he was getting buzzing, and judging by what I could see of his frets, it was absolutely not originally coming from uneven frets. It was coming from somewhere else. It was either fret slap because the action was too low or the neck was too straight, one of those things, but it certainly wasn't actual fret buzz that as we describe it, from uneven frets, because the only thing fret leveling is going to cure is uneven frets. It's not going to cure if you've set the action too low and the strings have got no room to slap or to spin. That's going to be it's going to cause fret slap. Now if you think that's fret buzz, you're going to carry on leveling and it still isn't going to go away. So it's learning the difference between the two, and knowing that the first rule of thumb is, if you're using this method and the actual notes that you're playing don't improve, or the bends that you had originally choking don't improve as you level, stop, because you're chasing the wrong thing. Now the truth is, if you stop, you might find that you actually don't know enough about what the other potential noises are, and you have to go and kind of ask some questions and find it out. But I can tell you that if you carry on with this method and it is not audibly and tactilely improving your playing or the notes playing, then you're not leveling frets, you're chasing something else that you aren't going to fix by leveling. Okay, so that's that bit. Now precision bit's done. Remember I said that tuning is pretty much all down to the condition of your nut slots and the slack in your strings. Most guitars have nut slots, particularly plastic ones like this, that will grip on the strings, and that friction will always basically always put the guitar out of tune slightly. So you'll never be able to keep it in tune, because you pull the string through this way and it gets stuck on friction, so there's a bit more tension on this side than there is, on this side than there is on this side. As soon as you bend a string, it pulls it through and evens it up, and so the guitar will go out of tune in process, and that will just keep going on for as long as you play it and as long as you tune it up. people, when I found out the importance of the nut slots in keeping the guitar in tune, but also getting the right first fret action down here, I was absolutely amazed. It was just an incredible thing to learn, and I've been a complete convert to getting this right ever since, which is why on all of my 3-a-side guitars, even though this nut sometimes doesn't fit exactly as close as a you know, a tailored bone nut will do, and you can see it, you can see that it's an insert or whatever. To me, it's worth paying that price, because you're getting tuning stability. Well, you're getting 50% of it. That's half the job done. The other half is unreleased slack in the strings. And again, it's a common misconception that people think you put the strings on, give them a bit of a stretch, and get them in tune, it plays, and you're thinking, all right, that's it, and off you go. And then you wonder why later on it's out of tune when you play it a bit. And often people think, oh, it's those tuners. And actually, it's because the strings are still holding some unreleased slack. And contrary to what a lot of advice people give, like tune it up a bit overnight, tune it sharp, leave it overnight, stretch it once, or whatever. Contrary to that advice, you actually have to physically pull out the slack yourself, and I'll show you how I do that when we restring this. Okay, so in the meantime, we've got the next stage of this. I like to say at this point, the precision part is done. We have precision leveled these frets in relation to each other, and we have set a precise first fret action, which will, by virtue of fitting the Tusq nut. So really, well, the point now is we're going into the process of polishing out these frets, which is a standard process I do on any guitar, which runs through a series of grades of paper and then onto the micro mesh set, ending up on about 12,000 grit, by which time we've got these shiny again. And then once that's done, I'm going to clean the whole guitar, re-oil the neck, and then we'll fit new strings, and we'll make any adjustments to the truss rod afterwards. The question is, if the pound loading, the poundage of the 9 strings is slightly greater than the 8s, what will that change in this setup? Well, the first thing to say is it will potentially pull a little bit more relief, and that is simple enough to correct back to where we want it with the adjuster. The other thing it might do is it will load the neck, or add some compression this way in the neck. And that compression is something that plays a surprisingly big part in where the frets sit relative to each other, which is why this method, doing it with the strings on and the poundage loaded on the neck, is slightly more accurate than doing it with the strings off in any other method you care to mention. Okay, so I'm going to need to now hang this up and make some thinner strips. But that is one of the primary reasons why I use this method. So we get we load the neck with compression, which, by the way, you don't get if you just bend the neck. So you put it on one of those jigs that just bends the neck, you're not getting this movement at the same time. You put it under 150 pounds of string loading, you're definitely getting a ball worker squeeze. And that longitudinal compression, believe it or not, does play a small part in changing the relative levelness of the frets. Not a huge amount, but actually enough to show up when you're leveling. So that's a small advantage of this method. Now, for those who think it's a lot of trouble to go to for such a small advantage, I just have to remind you that it isn't for that reason I do this method the way I do it. I do it this way for one primary improvement, and that is it's only with this method with the strings on that I can level a little bit, test the notes, the bends, whatever it is, and hear it unchoke or buzz, freeing up. Now, you couldn't do that without strings on it. So that's the true value of this method. You can hear what goes on as you're improving the fret levelness relative to each other. And of course you can only do that with the strings on, and a consequence of doing it with the strings on means is that you get a curved neck, and that's why you have to level with the curved tool. It isn't an end in itself. There's no other reason why, apart from those two reasons. One is I take away less metal because I know when to stop, because I've got the strings on and I can test every little bit of leveling I do. As soon as I reach a clear playing note, I stop leveling, so that preserves fret metal. And the second reason is that, as it happens, that method also is a little bit more accurate, because it brings into play this longitudinal compression effects on the wood and frets of the neck, which the other methods don't do. So, but it's quite interesting, the fact that it's curved is purely secondary, a sort of byproduct, if you like, of the need to be able to test as you level. And the only way you can do that is by having the strings on and ready. So all the rest of this sort of strange process that look different from other people's methods, all of that comes because of the advantage of being able to test the frets with the strings on, the ability to quickly test them. So it looks like it's some sort of clever sort of system. It just saves, first benefit, it saves fret metal, because I only level until the notes I want play at the action I've chosen. That's the first benefit. Saves fret metal. All the other methods take an unnecessary extra amount of metal to get to some sort of abstract or arbitrary levelness. And the second advantage is that there are a few others actually, but the second primary example, the second main advantage, is that it introduces longitudinal compression into the leveling process, whereas a neck that's been leveled with the strings off, you add the compression in afterwards. So you level it with the strings off, neck flat, put the strings on, load it up, it curves, and you get the compression. And what you leveled with no compression now has compression added, and the frets that were level with no compression move slightly when the compression is added, and they become slightly unlevel in relation to each other. Now, it's only a tiny amount, but it can, at very low actions, it can explain why people can level something, and possibly even explains why the Plek machine does what it does, levels the frets with the, I think possibly with the neck flattened, or even if it was with it curved, I don't know how it does it, but exactly, but it will definitely do it without strings on, i.e. without the longitudinal compression. And I've had quite a few guitars here that have claimed to have been through the Plek machine, and I found that I still needed to level them out a little bit for the ultra low action that the customer wanted. Of course, if the action was higher that the customer wanted, then it's not an issue, and we're only talking about the amount of leveling necessary for pretty low playing actions. And I've never been the kind of person who says to anybody that you should have a low action or should want one, and that's a purely subjective choice. But I know in my own experience I've always wanted a lower action rather than a high one, although some of the greatest guitarists in the world learn to play and prefer to play on high actions, and that's no problem at all. And some people have arguments about why, they can get a different feel or a different tone or a different response from the strings, and so on and so on, and that's absolutely fine. And those people probably wouldn't need me to set up their guitars, because a guitar with high action usually doesn't need the frets leveling, because the frets, uneven frets, only come into play when you have an action of a certain low height below. Hello, mind out for the...
Such a neat and tidy bonfire.
Yes, don't say that word. It's only a rumour, I think. Yeah, I'll see you in a little bit. I'm switching off in a minute, any minute. Anyway, yeah, so, high action. So That's why you can set up most acoustic guitars without ever needing to go near fret leveling, because for let's say a last fret action of about 2.5 millimeters on an acoustic guitar is a very low acoustic action. It's a very nice action to have, and 2.5 mils at the last fret is usually safely above any safely above the height where you run into uneven frets, or the effect of uneven frets. Anyhow, that's except for the guitar I did for Richard the other day, which, because it had the plateaued neck, it needed leveling to actually make the guitar play anywhere past the middle of the guitar, and it deserved to, because it sounded great even though it was a Chinese fake. Anyway, so that's the kind of the reason why this method scores for me above the methods that I started out using, which were pretty rough. Really, they took off far more metal than I needed to, and as a result, you know, on a newish guitar, maybe it's not such a big deal, but there are quite a lot of guitars you get through that I can look at and say, yes, I can do this, but I couldn't do it if I was using the old Crimson fret leveling file, for example, because, you know, I'm not putting the file down. It's like a, I don't know, standard file. What do they call them? I don't know. Standard metal file, wood file, or whatever, metal file. But it takes a lot more metal off than is necessary to make the chosen action play. And when you think that, stop and consider that fret metal is the life of the guitar, you wouldn't want to do that. It's not desirable to reduce the overall lifespan of the guitar in pursuit of level frets for a low action. So that's why this method saves or reduces the amount of fret metal necessary to take. And, you know, so I've had that feedback from everybody who's tried it out. They get it. You know, even in the case of someone like Mark, who's struggled to get it to work for him the first time out of the starting gate, but he got there, and he'll figure out what it was that he wasn't spotting the first time around. And when he does, you know, it'll be a skill that he can put to work on every guitar that he owns from here on inwards. And for most of us, that tends to be, you know, in the 10s and 20s. Once you're seriously into the guitar playing, you tend to like guitars as well, and you tend to have multiples rather than less. Okay, so I'm going to go off camera here at this point, because I'm going to polish out the frets and drink my tea, and I run through all the papers from 600 to 1000 to 1500, which means it actually reminds me I have to order some more. Then through the micro mesh from 1500 through to 12,000. Then I'm going to clean it all up, clean the pickups up, oil the board, put the strings back on, and intonate. We'll be done for the setup, but a day or so from now we'll replace the bridge, because we've got a gold roller bridge instead of this Tunematic horror. Kind of, it's a Tunematic bridge as well, but it's a slightly better one. It has a bit more intonation room available to it as well. Okay, see you in a bit. Okay, cleaned, oiled, brand new stringers. But like I said, when it comes to, do you know what? No, let's, after having said that, why put on the new strings only to have to slacken them off? And let's close up our packet of 9s, and let's take this indoors, and well, I suppose I could tweak. What do you reckon? We have to slacken it off. No, I'm going to wait. That just makes sense. What I will do is I'll put back on the scratch plate, got the pickups as clean as they will go, which is, there's a sort of limit, because for the simple reason that the finish is incredibly thin, and it will corrode, and if you then try and clean it with, well, it's not corroding exactly, it's just wearing a bit thin and possibly starting to want to try and rust from the inside out. But if you start attacking it with metal polish and so on, what you get is you thin it even further, which becomes quite sort of counterproductive, and you eventually end up with a sort of tarnished looking gold plate. So remember, it's gold plate, and it's designed to tarnish. That's what gives you the tardy old look. Now, I have a horrible feeling. Did I call Derek Kevin at some point? I don't know why. Apologies if I did earlier on. It's just I've got my wires crossed, my brain wires. So anyway, yeah, I'm going to put this on just lightly for a second. Are you still going? You are still going. Yeah, sorry. And then we'll just come back tomorrow whenever the new bridge is in evidence. So I won't do that up fully. I will stick the original nut to the scratch plate. It's just sort of a, so you can see how crappy it is. Not that one, this one. Generally speaking, it's not a good condition. Ow! Plastic under the fingernails. Yeah, it's not a nice quality thing. This, so it's a letdown really. Just seems a shame that they would go to, you know, make a pretty looking guitar like this and then skimp on the nut, which is such an important part of the thing. So again, just making sure that's tight, because that's one of the things that can rattle, and then you can find yourself chasing a buzz, but it's really just a rattle. Now I was going to check one more thing on here, and we'll tighten up the jack socket. I've given it a polish down so it's all clean and relatively dust free. What am I doing? Let's do it this way because that's where it is. Just make sure it's tight. So we go in there and we go backwards, lock it in place backwards, line up our adjustable spanner and then crank it forwards, and then gently drift that forwards, and we got that undone. Okay, strings, we'll just sit them out here till tomorrow. In fact, this could probably stay here, but I've got to do some spraying tonight, so I don't want this in here. Okay, see you tomorrow. Silent movie. Opportunity to re-oil the fingerboard, just because you can. Now, what do we need? Nines. Nines. With the nines. Yes. Nice. That's going to be taller because they tend to be taller bridges. Should be able to get down to the correct action. We'll just double check now. When putting on new strings with the adjustable nut, tighten up the middle two first. Let's just put all of these on in one go. It's so nice, living in a Amish paradise. That was Weird Al, wasn't it? Okay. Right. D. Line up the holes, make it easier basically. Okay, D on, that will hold the adjustable nut down, so that's not bad. We don't have to go too far down on the action. Right, pull it tight through, pull back one fret and a bit, wind it on, go over the loose bit first time round, and as it comes round again, pull the loose bit up and go under it the second time, and make sure the coils are tightly together, and that will hold the adjustable nut on. Then the G, pull back a fret, hold it down. Now this time run it so that the string comes off to the inside, which is the normal way of doing it. Pull up, put it under tightness, tension. Round we go, come along. And then drop that down on there. Now I've got the cover on loosely here because we might need to make an adjustment. Right, and then we can pretty much go fill in the rest. Okay, all on the roller saddles, which is good. Oh, hello, Morris. All right, Morris. There's not a lot of room up here, old chap. You can't really jump up. Sorry, we have to pet you down there. Rubber dubber. got a guitar in the way, but you're going to come up the other way, aren't you? Because you'd like to do that. Ready? 3, 2, 1. Here he comes, walking down the street. Hello? Hello. Okay, let's just wind this on a minute, Morris. Don't get yourself spiked on here, will you, my friend? Don't. It's horrible for humans, must be worse for cats. Worse for cats. Let's get rid of this spare wires. There we are. Down you go. Let's get it into basic tuning. Boom. Okay, stretching. This is what you need to do every time you change the strings. Push between thumb and forefinger to stretch all the slack out. And I'm going to try and miss the pickups because I don't want to cover them in fingerprints since we've cleaned them up. Stretch. Stretch, 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 stretch. So what we'll do is we'll stretch out the slack first, being very careful on the high E because it's quite easy to break. Fingerprints, be gone. Tune up again. And again. You want to do this as many times as it takes to stop going out of tune. Very nice. .25, too high on that end. Right, wind it in. wind it in. Just over one, barely over one, and the pickups are very close. What did I catch on there? Drop that down a bit. Very flat, but it's okay. There we have it. Done, done, done. Let's check the intonation. I bet it will be close anyway.